Welcome to Armchair Criminology. I'm your host, Rick Decker. Here in a second, we're going to play my excerpt from the sociocriminologist from iHeartRadio in light of everything that happened yesterday on D.C. and Capitol Hill with the transfer of power. We're going to listen to the excerpt of Society in Crisis because I think it's applicable. And then after that, we're going to come back and talk to it. Hope you
Greetings from sunny Charleston, South Carolina. You are listening to the Sociocriminologist. I am your host, Rick Decker. Here we are once again. And I feel like sometimes I'm repeating myself, but, we are a society in crisis, ladies and gentlemen. Every day I see on the news and social media and out in the world and where we live, people are not communicating the way we used to communicate. People used to talk to one another more face to face than we do today. Today, almost implicitly, we use social media. Even myself, I use social media to talk to a lot of my friends, my family. It's rare that I'll pick up the phone and call them, and shame on me. And, shame on everybody else that's doing that too. But, I'm also seeing in social media a lot of biblical quotes, and texts about all kinds of philosophies and possibilities, and it's just ridiculous. We are creating through social media a crisis in our society. And let me tell you why and how. People that since we've started using social media, we've become more and more isolated from other members of society, people in our in-groups, people that we interact with. In-groups have gotten smaller than what they have been before. We tend to have a group at work, which is relatively small in the first place, and then out in the world it used to be that your group was bigger based on co-workers, friends, relationships with your neighbors, etc. But now those are even smaller because they're premised on the so-called friends that we have in social media, and most of them we don't really know. I mean, there are people on my Facebook page that are my friends that I've never seen them face to face. I've never heard their voice, and I've never shook their hand. Would not know them if they came up and slapped me upside the head and said, "Hey, Rick, how you doing?" Social media platforms are so dominant in this country. We have seen a obsession within social media. And it's a surge that's been upgoing for the last 10 years. And I'm reading from a report from Dr. Middleton out in California, who is a psychiatrist. And social media is causing not only more isolation, but causing more anxiety, causing more depression, more introversion, and more antisocial behavior. We even see on the news the styles of reporting have changed. People in the news media relatively stuck to the facts. Relatively. Okay? But over the last 10 years, since they've started to understand that they are basically untouchable because the way the Constitution is set up. They're taking advantage of that and reporting not the facts, but their bias into these reports. Because all they have to say is, well, at the time I thought I was telling the truth and it was accurate. I mean, there's no repercussions for them. And there's also no repercussions, or very little repercussions, for people in social media. Now, we've talked about this before. There's a lot of positive things with social media. Some of the concerns, though, that I have as a scholar is the increase of isolation and the lack of real connection to others in our society. We present a false self in social media. There's a thing in social psychology called identity theory, social identity theory. And in fact, I talk about that in one of my classes that I'm writing for. They're getting ready to be released for sale. I'm doing classes on personality, profiling, criminology, sociology, things like that. But anyway, identity, social identity, is something that we perceive based off of our environment and our experiences within that environment. Social media allows us to manipulate that identity, and it allows us to escalate our personal self-identity beyond limits of the imagination, because we don't have to face the repercussions if somebody finds out it's not true. Like, I had a man argue with me one day on Facebook about the gun issue. Now, you all know how I feel about it. We've talked about it. I talk about the facts. Okay? And I had got snippet and told him, you might want to check on who you're talking to and check my credentials. He says, well, as far as I know, those are made up. You know what? He's right. We take so much for granted on social media that we assume that people are telling us the truth, because our sense of self-worth is based off of our perceptions, what we digest, and what we believe. So for us to admit that we've been duped by somebody on social media, that is a threat to our social identity. Social identity is very important for all groups. We use it to separate ourselves. We use it to bond ourselves. The other thing I see with social media is over-stereotyping and over-stigmatization. We all know that we all are capable of bias. We are all capable of being a victim of stereotype and projecting stereotype. And I see in social media an overabundance of it. Stereotype, stigmatism, hate is all perpetuated so much easier and in mass quantity, ladies and gentlemen, more than I've ever seen in all the years of my life. Now, we can connect with other people in social media, and that's good, that's fine. But who are we really connecting with? Since we can set up a false identity on social media, how do we know that who we're talking to really is what they say? When you look at my Facebook page, how the hell do you know? Because you're taking my word for it. Now, granted, I can produce the credentials. I don't have any problem with that. But there are a lot of people on social media that cannot produce their credentials. You know, there was a song years ago, I'm so much cooler online. I forget who sang it, but that's a reality in our society today. We have become so connected that we are actually disconnected, and we are merely observers of the lives of others instead of interacting in the lives of others. Because social media takes away the risk, and it takes away the reward of true intimacy. And I'm not talking about sex. I am talking about bonding, getting to know somebody, and connecting on that human level. And we've talked about connecting on the human level before and how it's missing in our society. And yep, here we are again, talking about it again. Have you noticed on social media? I mean, I have. I one of my friends tells me all the time, Rick, you know, why are you getting sucked in? And we all get sucked in. That is one of the problems with social media. We get sucked into something because we are adamant against it or have a different point of view of it, and we get sucked in without doing the research or really understanding what's going on. Case in point, there was a story aired about Arkansas and the satanic statue being on the grounds of the Capitol. Went all over Facebook. I had shared it, and I had made a comment of, well, it's good that they had the opportunity to do so, because we can't have one side represented without offering representation to the other side, regardless if we disagree with it or not. Very good friend of mine has a podcast, Unstructured. Eric had shared that on his page and wrote something, and then wrote Rick Decker. And I looked at it, and I dove into it, and I said, Eric, I didn't say that. I said this. Bless his heart that he's a good man, because he was like, Rick, I was using your name as a citation to where I found the story. I know what you said. Now, Eric is not only a friend but a colleague, and I look up to him. Can you imagine how embarrassed I was? I had to rightfully tell him, man, I'm sorry. I did not look into that any further, and I'm not used to being cited. So we all are victim to being sucked into one post or another, and it might even be something that we originated. But because somebody has a different opinion on it, we don't read it, and we just skim it. And that's another problem I see with social media. People do not really read everything. They skim it. I do it. So if I do it, I know many others are doing it as well. All of this is constantly going on, and what I'm afraid of is exactly to what Dr. Middleton has written about, I see so much antisocial behavior that I fear that social media is going to take us to a place to where we are not going to let someone into our life on a personal level, or let them see our unfiltered self. It's always going to be through a filter of social media. If we only let other people interact with our filter selves, we deny us and them true intimacy and relationship and bonding. We fail to let ourselves be vulnerable so that we can grow, so we don't hurt. Social media makes us strong and allows us to cover our weaknesses and our flaws. And those characteristics, ladies and gentlemen, is what helps us connect deeply with other people. We have become so connected we're disconnected. iPhones, for crying out loud, Androids, all that. Over the last 20 years, I was talking to my wife the other day. I forget where we were going. I said, I was driving. She was going tippy tap tap, playing a game on her phone. And I said, I remember a time where we used to shut the radio off and we all talked. And I looked up in the mirror, and we had passengers. Not only was my wife on her cell phone, but two of my adult sons had headphones in. Her mom was with us, and she was on her cell phone. The only person that wasn't on her cell phone was my granddaughter. She's 4. We are so connected that we're disconnected. Mental illness is perpetuated by isolation and avoidance, and that's going hand in hand with all platforms of social media. And if you think that I'm being over dramatic about it, when you go to dinner tonight, put your phone down, face down. Don't say a word to the people you are at dinner with. Watch what they do. I promise you, people at the table are going to be on their phones. They're going to be on their Facebook. They're going to be playing a game. They're not going to be engaged in the environment with you or other people in that environment. And that's dangerous. It's hurtful because we're losing the intimacy of bonding through people. But if you don't pay attention to your environment, that's how people get shot. That's how people get killed in public places, because they're not aware of what the hell's going on around them. Anxiety stems from the repression of our emotional experiences and from using our energy to hide parts of ourselves that we see that are unfit for relationships. When you hide your true self from somebody, you're taking away from your true social identity and your true self. All of this creates more anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses. It can also cause physical illness because, ladies and gentlemen, we are a biological organism. What we think about, we bring about. I don't know if you've ever been to a doctor, but I go to the doctor all the time, and my cardiologist says, Rick, reduce your stress. Do you know why they say reduce your stress when they tell you reduce your stress? Because stress builds and builds mentally until you can't take anymore. You've heard the old saying, nervous breakdown. Well, that's pretty damn accurate. They have snapped. Mentally, their brain has said, I can't take anymore. It fails to function. They don't know what to do to correct the situation. Social media causes us to promote a perfected or perfect self and makes us swallow all the negative aspects of our lives. Because if you put the truth out there, you're going to be ostracized and ridiculed. And let me tell you what, the people that are doing this to you, somebody else is doing it to them. So social media platforms are the greatest bullying platforms out there. And people get away with it every day. When we use social media, it makes us feel good because nobody sees our flaws. Nobody sees that we're not perfect. And they don't see us physically. We can take a picture of ourselves 20, 30 years ago where we were fit, skinny, beautiful, handsome, and put it up there and say, yeah, we look that good today. But when they see you in public, people see the truth. Social media is nothing more than another mask that we wear. It is used to cause arguments, to cause chaos, to cause stress. News media is just as guilty about perpetuating chaos and anxiety because they tell the story that they want to tell, and because they're news people and they're supposed to be checking the sources, we automatically assume because of their credentialing that they have the power over us. And let me tell you what, Milgram did an experiment years ago, way before social media, about power and submission. And he had taken information from the Nuremberg trials over in Germany where people were saying, I did what I had to do because Hitler told me. Well, he took people that he put into a shock box. They were students. We call them cohorts. And he took people outside the shock box. We'll call them participants. The cohorts knew they were not being shocked. Participants, however, did not. There was a gentleman standing behind the participant who was in a white coat. He's also a cohort. So, white coat guy would tell participant, ask cohort a question. Cohort deliberately answered wrong. White coat cohort told participant, shock him. Every time they answer the question wrong, shock them. Guess what happened? The cohort in the shock box got shocked, figuratively, because lights came on underneath a panel, a level of lights, green, red, yellow, whatever, and each light indicated a different level of pretend shock, and so they reacted accordingly. So these poor people out here ended up taking orders because of a perceived authority from the cohort in the white coat. It was that simple, and it was that horrific because the participants, some of them developed anxiety, mental problems, because they thought in the aftermath they had harmed somebody irreparably. There was another study that was done that was similar. Stanford prison experiment. No social media. The power of position and the assumption of authority was implemented and abused. News media, I'm telling you now, social media are abusing the power that we give them. And you know, we give them the power because we have the power to shut it off, minimize our time on it, and interact with people. I spend so much time behind the computer and in my office that I make it a point in my Franklin planner to be out at least one day through the week and every weekend out in society, away from the computer, away from the phone, away from my books, so that I can keep a true pulse on society and myself. We all need to do this, and we can tell ourselves that, yeah, we're doing that, but are you really? If you're checking your dang phone, if you're playing a game, you're looking at your social media account, your emails, whatever, taking pictures for Instagram, you're not connected with the people that are in the environment around you, and you're really not connected with the environment. Well, this is my time. I want to thank you all for listening to the show once again. If you find yourself that you want to email me, I can be emailed at rdeckerphd@gmail.com. Also, I don't know, because of the system that I use, I don't know where my listeners are. If you could send me an email and just say, hey, I'm listening to you from Nova Scotia, England, Arizona, Chicago, something like that, that would be great. And if you find yourself in Champaign, Illinois, over on, I think it's West Church Street, over by the police department, my niece has a barbershop over there called Vintage Edge Barbershop. Sharp young lady, great entrepreneur. Just walk in and say, hey, your uncle, sociocriminologist, told us to come in here and say, hey. I'd appreciate it if you would. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have the power to change our society and ourselves. We just have to choose to do that. We have to choose how we're going to make an impact in this world. And I promise you that I intend to leave this world as a wide brushstroke and not as a number 2 pencil. Take care of each other, ladies and gentlemen. Till we meet again, Carpe Diem.
Okay, and I'm back. So that show aired about 2 years ago on iHeartRadio, and I'm telling you, not damn things changed. That's true. COVID has caused for more isolation, higher rates of divorce, higher rates of suicide, higher rates of mental illness, all because of the fact that we're super, super isolated now. And social media, like I've said before, is Pandoras Box. Now, in retrospect with what happened yesterday, that was ideal of social chaos and social disorganization theory. Now, the one side was saying that the leaders caused this to happen because they set up false expectations of a Trump win, and then the other side says it's because of the Democrats and it's a ploy to perpetuate their agenda. And I've got to tell you, there's some stories going around this morning that 1 or 2 people popped up that through facial recognition that were identified as Antifa, who had been in one other location at an Antifa rally that incited violence and now was over here. inciting violence over here. But the thing that we need to remember about all this is that society, we are responsible for our own actions, and we have a tendency to blame everybody else for what it is that we want to blame everybody for and fail to accept responsibility. And I'm telling you, it is my opinion as a sociologist and as a criminologist that all this erratic behavior is made possible through social media because, again, our social identity is different than the identity we have at home, our personal identity. It's different than the identity we have at work. You know, at each environment that we experience in our lives, we create a different personality. No, we're not psycho. We're not, yes, we're antisocial because of the social media thing, but we're not psychotic. Creating different environments, personalities for different environments is total normal. You've heard through Shakespeare, all the world's a stage. And Irving Goff, he developed dramaturgy, which is a theory that talks about the different acts that we are in throughout different parts of our lives. And then you couple that with social interactionism that helps us communicate because it helps us understand meaning to the words that we give them. And then we get issues like this, which are clearly systemic to groupthink, because you've got group A out here doing one thing and group B over here doing another. And each thinks that they're doing the right thing, but neither one of them are talking, so we have chaos. And that's exactly what happened yesterday. We've got people that didn't know what the other side was doing, people that weren't supporting the other side. There was a lot of stuff going on. News media is just exacerbating the problem. And then people have their own opinions, and the problem is that even though we're able to vocalize our opinions, we're not really being heard. In communication, there's active listening, and active listening perpetuates an understanding and that people are being heard, really heard. And being heard is different than understanding and being listened to. So on this rant and tangent that I went in on this, that we're in crisis, and I said this 2 years ago, we really are more of a crisis than we ever have been. Some of the stuff that we're seeing today is the same stuff that people saw during the fall of Rome and other tyrannical societies, Venezuela, a few other places I can't think of off the top of my head. And I'm not saying our government's tyrannical, because that's another hour talk, because in order to say our government's tyrannical, you're going to have to qualify it. That is it just one group that is, or is it both groups, and everybody has their own damn opinion. And the only thing that I see that we have now is social dysfunction, because nobody, or rarely, actually does research anymore. Nobody digs into what the truth is. We automatically fire back at the other because we don't agree with what they're saying, without processing it and without thinking it through. And that is always going to be a problem. And there are ways to circumvent groupthink and antisocial, discord, but our society is too locked up into what I call a "what about me" syndrome, and everybody, myself included, okay? And we've gotten to the point that we've lost the "what about us" What about my neighbor? Because I can tell you, when I was coming up as a kid, I knew my neighbors knew me. Now, as an adult, I know 2 people. 2 within my neighborhood. And that's people that are not on social media as my friends. They are actually people that I can walk across the yard to or walk across the street and talk to. There is a lack of that in our society. Because there is a lack of that and a lack of understanding of culture and lack of understanding beliefs and allowing people to believe the way they want, even though we don't agree with it, we have serious social disorganization. We are truly a society in crisis. Until next time, I hope you enjoy the show. Please, for God's sake, let's take care of one another. And until next time, Carpe Diem.